guess I can't seem to turn off I have the hardest time with this camera. Oh, well, I'll just leave it on. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nancy.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Here we are, FY21, 2020, quite a year, eh? Thanks for joining us today. We're going to do your orientation that you're used to doing. We do apologize for doing it a little bit late this year. I'm sure you all know why. We've all been super busy. So this actual meeting sort of is a little bit of a mixture of your typical orientation that you get in July, as well as the reporting meeting that we did last year. And we'll talk a little bit about reporting during this conversation. I'm going to have Wes and Sarah are new. So in just a second, we're going to introduce them. Wes is going to run our slides for us. Andy, you want to jump in and get everybody greeted, and then we'll go from there? Or not? He may be stuck trying to mute everything.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, so there's been a lot, as Nancy pointed out, it's been a pretty crazy first quarter of this fiscal year. The good news is that we had on some new staff, and I think you guys, some of y'all have met Wes and Sarah in some earlier meetings, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to introduce them to any who haven't met them yet. But in previous years, we've always looked for we've always been short-staffed, and I've said, well, next year we're going to be fully staffed, and we'll be able to get everything on track. And so then this year we were fully staffed, and basically our funding was tripled. So I've got poor Nancy and Elaine trying to handle over $8 million worth of funding. Fortunately, before long, we were able to, double the team really that's working directly with HUD grants by adding Wes and Sarah. And so Dr. Wes Grooms and Sarah Graham both have been doing a great job in their first month or so on the team, and are catching on really quickly. And Nancy will go into what people's specific responsibilities are going to be later on in the briefing. But I just wanted to thank Wes and Sarah for hard work they've done already on the team, and poor Nancy and Elaine for keeping everything afloat until they got here. And
So
now that we've got everybody on board, hopefully things will go a lot smoother from here on out. So thanks to everybody for their patience. We're all new CARES Act requirements, and so bear with us. In a lot of cases, if you ask a question, we may have to refer to HUD or refer to Develop Louisville or others for answers, but we'll all figure it out together. So thanks to everybody for your patience and your teamwork, and I'll turn it back over to Nancy.
All right. If you want to take a look at your screen, you'll see the agenda here today. I won't go read down through all of that. You can pretty well see we're going to talk about introductions, let you know who's handling what, talk a little bit about the differences between regular HUD funding and COVID, and then some regulatory information, and then we'll talk about your grant agreement information, your reporting and your monitoring, and then we can take some questions at the end. I'm going to go ahead and hit the next slide, please. There we go. All right, so this is, all of us, but just sort of as a quick reminder, we are Andy's team. Andy's our executive administrator. Nancy, me, obviously, and Elaine are your grants contract coordinators. In the past, I did the programming, and Elaine did the financial part of our traditional funding. And then Ethan kind of he does lots of different things. He's sort of in a special projects mode right now, but you'll hear from him from time to time as well. Chelsea is actually on the EAF team, but she's a part of Andy's team, and sort of when we're running behind, she helps us get caught up. And so from time to time, you'll hear from Chelsea as well. And as you can see from the stars, we've got some new folks. So Sarah, if you want to take a second and introduce yourself, kind of give everybody a little bit about your background. You may have to unmute yourself. We can come back to you if you can't pick it. Wes, you want to do an introduction of yourself since we're all waiting on Sarah?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. I didn't realize you have to unmute on both the computer and the phone. Hi, everyone. As Nancy and Andy already said, my name is Sarah Colbrand. You may have known me previously as Sarah Cole. Before coming to RCS about 6 months ago, I have historically worked at YMCA Safety Services and also here in Jefferson County Family Court.
Awesome.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I asked because there are two phone numbers that end on 68, and I'm not sure which one is which. So my name is Wes Grooms, and I joined the same day that Sarah did. And actually, I went to the same PhD program at U of L that Andy just finished up at. And so I have a varied background, been in real estate, corporate banking that serviced the federal government banking needs. And now I'm looking forward to doing this with you guys. So.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have everybody here. And I forgot that before we move to the next slide, those of you that are new, have we got anybody online that's new this year? If so, go ahead and introduce yourself before I hit mute all. So we'll give you about 30 seconds to let us know who you are. Nobody yet?
This is Tracy Utter from St. John Center. And I have been here for about 7 months, and I have been really digging deep in the world of grants and learning quite a bit because I come from a for-profit background. But learning lots, having fun.
Welcome on board, Tracy. Go ahead. Anybody else? And then we've got a couple new folks. We have a new guy at Boys Haven, Eric. Jane is new at St. Vincent de Paul. We have some new folks at YMCA. And I believe Taylor from VOA is new. And Christy is not new, but she has joined us back from Family Scholar House. Did I forget anybody? All right. I'm going to go ahead and hit mute all. Wes, you can go ahead and move the slide. And if you need to speak, you can unmute, but this way we don't have a lot of jumping in and out. So I think I did it. Let's see. There, I got it. Okay, so this first slide, this first slide I've got I thought it would be helpful to kind of talk about just a little bit about the differences between the traditional HUD funding and the HUD-CV, which is related, of course, to COVID. And you'll see there's some blue stars on here. So the next slide has a little bit more detail because there are kind of some gray areas in here where the two can kind of cross over. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. Those of you that have been doing this for a while are pretty used to the regular HUD processes. So we're talking about ESG, CDBG, and HOPWA. So the financial reimbursement and documentation requirements for both traditional and COVID are the same. The reporting on traditional is a little bit different. We do report annually to the federal government for the traditional HUD, but we report quarterly for CAPER. So we've actually got a report going out at the end of this month related to COVID. Not a lot of that has started moving yet, simply because we've now started getting all the agreements out and everything's clearing up. But in the next, 2 or 3 months, that'll change drastically. So that's a little bit different. Under the traditional HUD plan, you have to, if you have ESG, you have a match required. So it's, 50-50 or 1-for-1. if you are using the HUD COVID ESG, which is known as ESG-CV, there is no match required for that. And then, remove this recorder button, it's blocking my view. Sorry, hang on. Oh, well, I guess it's just gonna have to be in the way. So, and then on your income, for all of your monitoring or for all of your reporting, you have to carefully watch the income levels on your clients. And under the traditional, there are some specific documents that we require for you to gather for your clients to, document their income. Under ESG COVID, it's a little bit less restrictive at the beginning, but you still have to find the appropriate documents later on. So sort of at the beginning, because this is designed as an emergency funding, you can get the income information from the client, just, spoken by the client and put into the folder. You just have to make sure that you go back after the fact and find the information to back up what they said. You want to go back for me one more time there, Wes? Can't see my, there you go, perfect. So the income is a little bit different. And then on your HOPWA diagnosis, usually there's specific documents that are required to show the diagnosis of the client for HOPWA or to be HIV or AIDS. But under the HUD, HOPWA-CV, you can sort of like self-profess. If your client can state to you that they have AIDS or HIV to get the process started, and then later on you have to find the supportive documentation. So you still have to get the correct information, but at the beginning you've got a little leeway, again, because the COVID is designed to be emergency funding. Normally under your ESG, you've got a 30% AMI, which is annual median income, if anyone is unfamiliar with that term. There is a chart that is specific to that. You want to make sure you refer to that in your work program budget. That is the income that you have to prove for your clients. I think it's, maybe attachment 8 or something. It's going to be in your executed agreement. And so normally under ESG, that's 30%. But if you're doing the COVID ESG, the ESG-CV, it's 50%. And so that's a little bit different. And then, okay, Wes, go ahead and hit the next slide, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. So if you noticed on that last slide, I had 2 blue stars. One was under ESG match required, and the other one was under ESG 30% AMI. So in talking with Ethan this morning, I realized that I needed to clarify that a little, which by the way, Ethan's not here. He'll come in a little bit later. So suppose you are using the traditional HUD funding, but you're using it for COVID-related expenses. And a lot of you are, and that's okay. If that's how you are using your traditional HUD funding, then you can follow the guidelines for the COVID. So in other words, the AMI would go up and your supportive documentation on your income and your diagnosis can change a little bit, according to which type of funding you have. So I know that's a little bit tricky. It really just depends on how you're using your funding. Kind of when I was talking with Ethan earlier today, he sort of described it as, if you've got a caseworker that, specifically works on, a traditional program that you always have versus a case manager that is, say, we're working on job readiness and you're now going to teach them how to do virtual applications. So, in that part, you're now using the COVID, so you can kind of change your guidelines a little bit. And it looks like Ethan actually is here. So if he wants to jump in and explain this better, he can. Bottom line though, if you look at your executed agreement and your workbooks and all that, and you're not sure, or you've got a client that comes in and you're not sure how they classify, you can always just call us. I mean, we'll talk it through and we'll look at your work program budget and sort of figure it out. So thanks, Ethan. He said he doesn't need to explain it, but I did fine. So anyway, that's kind of the difference on that. So you have traditional and you had HUD, CV, but there are circumstances where you can, use the CV guidelines for both. Do you feel like you understand that? If you don't, stick a little sentence in the chat box and we'll try to get back to you on that. Otherwise, I'm gonna move to the next slide. Go ahead. Thanks, Wes. Okay, so as we talked about earlier, you do have new account coordinators. And so when we brought on the new team members, Andy decided that he would break us out sort of, I used to always call this dedicated teams. So he decided to break us out by dedicated teams rather than, Nancy and Elaine are going to do traditional and Sarah and Wes are going to do COVID. Instead, he broke us out by accounts, and everyone now should know who they have. If you don't, you can go ahead and look at this list real quick. I know that I have done some of the amendments and the grant agreements for all of them, and that's simply because I just started it and I was just finishing what I started. But as you move forward, if you are with Home of the Innocents, House of Ruth, Keeping It Real, 7 Counties, Society of St. Vincent de Paul, Legal Aid Society, Up for Women and Children or Youth Build, you'll be working with Sarah Graham. And if you are Family Scholar House, Father Maloney Boys and Girls Haven, Kentucky Refugee Ministries, Kept, Salvation Army, Wayside Christian Mission, and Wellspring, then you're going to be working with Wes. Go ahead and click the next slide, please. Thanks. And then Elaine and I did not split our responsibilities. We're basically taking care of the same people, but kind of more like the traditional way we used to do it. So I do most of the programming and the setting up, and then Elaine does most of the financial stuff. And then we sort of help each other. If I have a lot of stuff going on the program side, I need help, she helps me. If she has a lot of stuff on the financial side and needs help, then I help her. And so our team, we have Center for Women and Families, Coalition for the Homeless, Family Health Centers, Hoosier Hills AIDS Coalition, Jeff Street, St. John, Volunteers of America, and YMCA. And then there's a couple of responsibilities that we have kind of split out a little bit differently. And again, this may change because as we sort of figure out the best way to manage the workload, Andy may have us change it around. So, if it ends up changing, don't be surprised. But at the moment, seems to be working really well. So I will still, moving forward, handle the monitoring and the reporting for all of the agencies. And Elaine, Sarah, and Wes will handle the expenditure verifications. Any questions on the assignment stuff? If so, go ahead and ask those before I move to the next slide. Are we good? Okay. The next slide has important dates. These are in your grant agreements, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but sort of just to make you aware, if you look here, you'll have the dates in the middle column are when the traditional HUD reporting is due, and then the HUD-CV reporting is in the right column. And I should clarify, but this part, I can see this could be a little bit confusing now that I'm looking at it. So this is about the programming, okay? You know that for your financials, you turn those in each month, and the date for that is the 22nd. Elaine, is the date the same for the CV stuff, or any of the three of you can answer that? Or is it 22nd for everybody, or does it change according to what you're sending in?
It's the 22nd of each month.
Same for all, whether it's traditional or CV. Okay, very good. So this is the programming information here. So we do have that broken out a little bit different to give you time. So, because, I know for a fact that a lot of you have EAF funding and their reporting is due on the 15th. And so, that time span there between about the 12th and the 25th is pretty intense. And so we decided to break it out a little bit to help you pace yourself. So the traditional HUD program reporting is going to be on the dates that are here in the middle screen: October 22nd, January 22nd, April 22nd, and July 22nd. And your HUD-CV is going to be October 21st, which don't worry, we're going to talk about that in a second. January 27th, April 28th, and July 21st. Now, as you know, Ethan and I have been emailing you about various reporting things because we are still sort of figuring this all out and putting it all together. Ethan is working on the CV reporting that's due at the end of the month. And so I've been emailing you out to get your project ID numbers and things like that. And so some of this we're still trying to figure out. If there is a reason that either you are not comfortable turning in your reporting tomorrow or the next day, or there's a holdup where you're waiting on Ethan and I, by all means, let me know. I mean, you can ask for an extension. That would come to me. And because I know the first quarter is pretty crazy. And then we kind of sort of get in, a better mode at the second quarter. So if you are in a position where you can go ahead and turn your stuff in, and some of you already have, That's awesome. Turn it in. If you're in a situation where you need to sort of have a little bit more comfort with what you're doing, or you maybe need some technical assistance from us, or maybe Ethan and I are working on putting your stuff together and you need an extension, that's okay. You can just email me and just let me know what you need, and then we'll just go from there. If you do ask for an extension, what I do tend to like to ask you is to have you tell me what date you think you get your information in. So, you know, if you can't do it by the 22nd, when can you do it? And then I make a note to check in with you on that date. Any questions about the reporting dates? Okay, great. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I think somebody had a question.
Yes. Okay, yeah, I'll be here.
Somebody have a question? Jane, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, no.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, sir.
That's okay. So the next couple of pages are the regulatory updates, and most of these we put up here every year. There's only one or two that are new this round. And the reason these are up here is that we just want to make sure that you remember to check all of these federal regulation documents. This information is extremely important to your reporting and your reimbursement. And I know it takes a long time to read, but you know, if you want us to send you a copy of this PowerPoint or these links, go ahead and make sure you commit some time to reading through these if you haven't already. Again, these are the same ones that were on there last year, but they are important. And while we would love to know it all, that would be awesome. And we do spend a lot of time on HUD Exchange getting your answers for you. It's just sometimes when we don't know it all. So it would be helpful for you to go ahead and do your review of these items as well. So this one is violence against women. And actually all of this whole page is about violence against women. Next slide. So as you know, the area median income levels change each year. This table was updated in April. So this is the current area median income. And if you are curious for yourself how it changes, the link down here at the bottom is the same one we always use. You can go look at it. You just want to remember that we are Metro FMR. And so you want to look at the Metro FMR income when you are looking up your area median income for Louisville. I don't know why the 60% is on there. Maybe somebody else can tell me that one is on there. And so I kind of leave it on there. I'm not sure. We use for mostly 30, 50, and 80. But if you're curious about what 60% is, that's there as well. All right, next slide. Well, I think I've got one out of order because somewhere in here I have regulations about COVID cares. Maybe that's a little bit further down. No, you're fine. You can stay where you are. It's okay, Wes. That's fine. We'll find it. You stay right there. Perfect. So this is some of the updated information on the payment request. And I know that you all are starting to send those in. Probably this will end up being more stuff that you'll ask Wes and Sarah and Elaine while we sit here if you have questions, but I'll review them real quick. So as you all know, last year we updated the payment request policies and procedures, and we have along those lines, we have the handbook for how to turn in your reimbursements, but that needs to be updated. So if you don't have a copy, we will send it to you, but it's still 2019. Hopefully we can get that updated here soon. It's just, it takes a lot of time. So we've been doing COVID and stuff. And as Andy mentioned earlier, most of you already know that we are doing your 25% prepayment. That was approved by RCS, and we're excited about that because I hope that that will help things flow more smoothly for all of us. And so you'll start seeing, most of you have gotten your prepayment amendments and your grant agreements where you signed that you understood that. And a few of those checks are starting to cut now. So I'm going to guess that you'll start seeing those checks, and some of you may have already, but probably in the next week, 2 weeks, I'm thinking, because a lot of that has already gone through. We are finishing up a good portion of that. A good bit of that went through last week. So you had your signatures last week, and then we sent it on to OMB. So hopefully you'll get some money soon. If it feels like it's taking a long time or you want us to check on your group individually, that's fine. You can just either call your account coordinator or call me. It doesn't matter. We can pretty much tell you where it's at in the process. So the payment request, and I'm going to have Elaine talk about this a little bit because I know this changes a little bit each year. So currently we need to have your payment requests submitted via mail, so snail mail, or you can drop them off. I would just say that during election season, it's really hard to drop off because there are lots of people coming in and out of that door downstairs. And if you do drop off, the other thing to remember is that we are still under COVID regulation. And so we are not here every day. We take turns. And so you would want to touch base with your account coordinator and find out what day they're so that you can get your information in. Or I think Sarah and Wes are here just about every day, but Elaine and I and Ethan are on a different schedule. So if you need to turn your stuff into us, check in with us about when we can drop it off. Either we'll be here or we'll make arrangements with Chelsea or Sarah or Wes or somebody to get your stuff for you. You don't want to just drop it off. You want to make sure you've talked ahead of time. Okay, and then some of you were asking earlier this week about whether or not you were going to receive a new PR template for FY21. And so the answer to that is to go ahead and use the template from FY20. And if you don't have that and need it, just reach out to your grants contract coordinator. And Elaine, I may have you talking here in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and have you talk for a second about the payment request, because you and I were talking earlier about how some of this stuff can come through electronically, like the workbooks and so forth. So why don't you take a minute and kind of help everybody get organized in their mind about how these reports need to come in?
Okay. As far as your pay log workbooks, those can be emailed to us, but your supporting documentation, that needs to be either sent snail mail or drop off arrangements, or as Nancy was just saying a few minutes ago. But the workbooks we do need to have even in review after you've sent your supporting documentation through the snail mail and your invoice and all of that's there. But we do still need to be able to reference back to your actual workbook. So sending that workbook through the email to your grants coordinator and the Metro Compliance mailbox, as well as your actual invoice request and supporting documentation through the mail or drop-off arrangement, and even in some circumstances, a pickup arrangement. We just need to coordinate as long as we can until these restrictions are lifted from our building. And does anyone have questions about that?
Hi, this is Kelly with Legal Aid Society. Hello, Elaine. I just wanted to check about, as long as it's postmarked by the 22nd, is that all right? Or would you prefer it to be dropped off if it's going to be that close to the due date?
Oh, that's quite all right, Kelly. I understand that that due date is going to fluctuate, especially within the first quarter with everyone. So we are open to all of everyone's needs. So if your needs need to be adjusted, then just let your grants coordinator know, and we can work with you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Good to talk to you.
You too.
Anybody else have any questions about that?
This is Tommy with VOA. How are you?
Hi, Tommy.
Hi, Tommy.
Hey. In the past, we have sent electronic copies of the PARs to you as well. Do you still want those, or will the paper copy be enough?
Actually, let's just stick with the paper copy for right now. But your grant coordinator might reach out and request the PAR workbook just in case something they need to look back on. So I'm going to leave that pretty much to each grant contract coordinator. But we definitely need the pay log workbooks. The PARs, we can fluctuate if there's questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tommy.
Any other questions on that? Okay, awesome. Well, one more thing I was thinking about while we're talking about the programming stuff. A few of you have reached out to me this week about special reporting issues that you're sort of waiting to hear back from me on. And so I'm aware of that. And Ethan and I are meeting tomorrow to go over some of that. So just as a heads up for those of you that have asked, I will get back with you on your questions that you asked. All right, Wes, you can turn the page for me, please. Thank you. So this page, and I think the next page maybe after it, are some of the grant regulations that are specific to grant agreements. You all have already gotten your executed agreements, and so most of this stuff you're already familiar with, but just to let you know, if you're looking for information on the audits or how you should do your performance reporting or a little bit more information about HMIS, you can see in this slide where to find that information. Because we just want you to, like I said earlier, read this information and pay particular attention to the sections that are related to the financial reporting, audit requirements, record keeping, and records management. And then there's also some information there about more detail about HMIS and SAGE. Okay, next slide. A few more of the regulations. So this one right here, the Transparency Act. So, and most of this we take care of on your executed agreement anyway, but just sort of as a reminder, it's related to FFATA. If your agency has more than $750,000, and some of you are going to get this wrong, so if I don't get it right, I mean, if I get it wrong, just correct me. If you have more than $750,000 of federal money coming in, then you need to, on the FFATA, state the income of like the top, I don't know the exact amount without reading, 2 or 3 executives in your agency. And that's all related to, of course, transparency of information. Then the other ones are related to post-award reporting and things like that. Next page. These are related to your information on fair housing, non-discrimination, and equal opportunity. And actually, this reminds me of something. In a minute, we're going to talk about the monitoring, but sort of make a note that I did notice in monitoring this year that some people had this information readily available in the files, and some I had to ask for it. So just sort of moving forward, make sure you print up your information on fair housing and your information on non-discrimination, equal opportunity, so that when we get to monitoring, that information is right there. So, and I know, you all have guidelines. It's just they weren't always readily available in the files. Okay, and if you ever wonder where to find the information on CDBG, HOPWA, or ESG, you can look right down here. 24 CFR 570 is CDBG. 24 CFR 574 is HOPWA. 24 CFR 576 is ESG. Next page. All right, this is the link if you want to, on a Saturday night with popcorn and a lot of coffee, read all 335 pages of the CARES Act. So if you want to get more information on the CARES Act or make sure that you are following the guidelines within, the link is right there. And sort of to say, I mean, if you want to read all 335 pages, you can, you're welcome to, but just sort of to let you know, the information about CDBG, HOPWA, and ESG begins on or around page 325. And it's not too many pages, it's maybe 10 pages or so, a little bit less than that. Next slide. All right, so a little bit of information about the grants reporting. Federal regulations stipulate that outcome and demographic information from HUD-supported report programs be reported. So this is a mandate, we have to do this. And this is obviously to ensure that the funds are used responsibly and effectively. The reporting is electronic. So if you are in a situation where you can use HMIS, we want you to use HMIS. There are some circumstances where you do not have to use HMIS, and that's going to be like domestic violence clients or HIV and AIDS clients. You don't have to use HMIS. But if you are in a situation where you can, by all means do that. The majority of you already have reporting set up in HMIS, but if there's some of you that haven't and are wanting to do that, just get with Ethan and I and Will can help us looking at Coalition for the Homeless can also help you get that set up. For those of you that aren't using HMIS, you have to use a particular exception report, and those were sent out to you in emails last week. So I sent out 3 emails. One had the ESG exception report, one had the CDBG, and one had the HOPWA. If you are not using HMIS and you did not see those exception reports that I sent, by all means reach out and make sure you get those from me. So as far as updating the information in HMIS, it's just like we said in the reporting, you want to have that information in by the 22nd or the 21st or whatever's the date, and you want to follow. And so one of the notes on that is to follow the local continuum of care data entry schedule. And again, just make sure you use the appropriate exception report. Any questions about that? I think last year we had more questions, but we're kind of starting to figure it out now. I heard a beep. Somebody have a question? Okay, next one. So this is an example of a non-HMIS grant reporting. Ethan put this together for us last year. And this would be what you would use. I don't have it I can send you a copy of it if you want to see it, or just check your email from last week. But it asks the same questions as HMIS in an Excel format that we can then transfer information to our CAPER and IDS and all that. So that's what this looks like here. Next slide. All right, so I did maybe 7 or 8 monitorings last year, and what the next several slides are related to monitoring. Most of this was in here last year. I didn't change a lot. I maybe added a little bit based on the experience that I had this year. Just as a reminder, I do monitor and audit. We make a determination on who we need to audit. We try to make that determination in the fall or around December. Sometimes if things are really busy, it takes a little bit longer. And in a couple slides from now, you'll see the different guidelines we look at to determine who is going to be monitored each year. But just sort of as a reminder of why we do this, again, these are federal, this is federal money. And so we do have to monitor, because what happens is, of course, if we are audited and your information is incorrect, then it obviously goes against us as well. So it needs to, our reporting needs to be seamless from what you have as well, to what we have. And so that's why we do the auditing. There is obviously a focus on adherence to integrity bulletins. We want to make sure that you are applying internal controls. We want to make sure that you are working to decrease in the occurrence of fraud, waste, or abuse. We also are obviously wanting to improve public confidence in the government's ability to manage programs. And we want to protect both your and our assets and mitigate risk. The monitoring can just vary according to the year. We do it different. Sometimes we do face-to-face, sometimes we do desk review, sometimes we do mix and match. Last year, the attempt was to do all of it face-to-face, and then COVID hit, and so it sort of ended up in this kind of partially face-to-face and partially desk, but we got it figured out. So typically what happens if in a face-to-face is I will come on site, and depending on how many I have, I'll bring somebody with me. I'm sure that I will cross-train someone this year on that as well. And so the monitoring is going to include site visits. We're going to examine your financial records, policies, and procedures, and your client files. So just make sure that those files are clean and match up with what you sent in here, because we do check for that. And before I do the monitoring, I send you a checklist of the different items that we're going to review, so that there won't be surprises. And then I think last year I gave everybody maybe 4 weeks to get ready, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It just depends on how early in the year I can get it started as to how long you have to get your information together. Next slide. So here are some of the, can you go back one? Perfect, thanks. So this is the information that those of you who were with me last year, this is not information that is new. You are familiar with this. What we do when we are determining who is going to be monitored is we sort of develop a tracker, a tool that looks at these items for every single awarded group. So we're going to look at the years since you were last monitored. We're going to look at the percentage of your total HUD, of our total HUD awards. So if you are someone who has a higher percentage of the award that came to us from the federal government, that's going to put you in an area where you are more likely to have a monitoring. It is based on previous findings and concerns sometimes. One of the things we look at that is related to this measurement tool, we sort of develop a score, is going to be related to whether or not there's been any employee turnover in key grant related positions. So, you know, a CFO or an accounts manager or a grants manager or something like that, those kind of folks, we do like to track that so that we know, and that helps you all as well. If you have someone coming in that's new, it sort of helps them prepare for what they need to do to meet the guidelines for federal funding. We look at the number of years that you've had funding with us. So that basically means that if you are new, fairly new, you're probably going to get audited at least the first year or within the first couple of years. And again, it's not a punishment. It's just a pruning. It's a way to help us make sure we're all on track and getting all the right information in there. So if you happen to be one of the ones that's monitored, don't panic. It's just, you know, it's part of it. We just do it to make sure everybody's on track. And we might look at you if you have some issues in the previous year. And just sort of as a note, the tracking tool that we use to apply the scores is made available to you all. It's for transparency. It's always available. It's not a secret. And so when we start to put that together, then we'll send it out to you and you can see how we landed at the ratings that we landed at and how we determined who was going to be monitored. And we tend to try to have, you know, a little bit from each category. You know, and I say that a couple different ways. So if you're ESG, CDBG, or HOPWA, we're going to try to have some from each of those. Or maybe your stuff is more broken out, like you might have supportive services and you might have case management. I'm sorry, you might have supportive services and you might have rapid rehousing. You know, I might take files from the different types of services that you provide so that I get a good idea. And I typically just, it's sort of a blind pool. I will tell you which numbers to pull, or I'll contact with you of a way to decide which ones, or if I'm there, I'll just walk in and pull them. So that's typically how that works. Next slide. I want to make sure that you all know that COVID, the federal HUD announced earlier in the summer that all COVID awards were going to be monitored to some degree and that was per federal mandate. Now, what that looks like, you know, we're still working through. Because obviously there is a lot of COVID funding, but the COVID funding is emergency funding. And so they are watching it very closely. In fact, Andy said the other day that we have already had one of our COVID related awards has already been audited. And that was we only started this a few months ago. So the COVID stuff we're definitely keeping an eye on it. And so is the federal government. One thing you want to be really careful about is to make sure that you are not duplicating any services. That's something that we're going to monitor very carefully. You want to make sure that you're turning in the same thing across, you know, 2 or 3 different awards that has already been paid under something else. And when we are tracking the different awards you have, that's why your grant program budget changed a little bit this year and your application changed a little bit this year. That's because we included that in there so that we could see what you have, what we're covering, and what you have in other types of federal funding so that we can make sure that there's no duplication of services going on. You want to make sure that both in monitoring and in regular reporting that your records and your documentation is really clear. You want to make it really easy to for me to access. And bottom line is if I can get to it quicker, I'm going to spend less time there. That's your goal, is to make sure that everything's really clean and easy to find and we don't have to spend a lot of extra time digging, because that's sometimes when we run into challenges. So just make sure and go ahead and start now. You know, if there's a chance that you're going to be monitored, maybe you know that you're new or that you have a fairly high portion of our HUD award, go ahead and start, you know, planning now for the things that I'm going to ask for. These things that you can use from this PowerPoint will help you get prepared. I mentioned earlier about the fair housing and the equal opportunity stuff. That's something you make sure is in all your files. If you have financial record procedures in your brain, but they're not written down, or you don't have a way to show how you break out your funding by grants, you don't have grant codes or something assigned, those are things you can start working on now to help you get ready for your monitoring. I think I have one more page on monitoring, and then we'll take questions. You want to turn the page, Wes? Or 2 more pages? So on your reporting, both in the reporting when you turn it into me and when you're monitored. We're going to thoroughly review your activities and performance. So those are the things that are going to be based on your outcomes and your applications, as well as what you've put into HMIS and your expenditures. Now, the great thing about the financial expenditure part is you're already, basically every time Wes and Sarah and Elaine look at your financial reimbursement request, the guidelines for what you are required to turn in for your payments to be approved, well, that's the same thing that's required for monitoring. So we're sort of catching that on the beginning to make sure you've got that right. So we rarely run into issues in that category because we're making you turn it in according to monitoring guidelines for your money in the first place. So that works out great. With regard to your client files, you want to just realize that we're going to look at your intake forms, your client and your agency agreements, your income verifications, and your HOPWA documentation. And also just as I didn't have any problems with this year, but I always like to remind people, make sure that your files, that you have a way to keep them confidential, whether they're locked electronically or locked in a filing cabinet. I will be looking for that to make sure that the records are kept in a confidential location. We will review your performance reports. We'll look for both qualifying and quantifying data. I can't say those two words at the same time. And the quality of the data that we're getting, we look at all of that. Next slide. So procurement policies, I do look at those, client termination policies, employment policies. I already mentioned the fair housing. You want to make sure in your financial records that there is a clear separation of duties. So you need to have more than one person signing off on procurement. And you want to make sure that if you have ESG match, that you have that data provided. Another thing, I don't see it real often in our agencies, but from time to time, there are agencies that have program income, and you need to make sure that that's clearly documented as well. The bottom one is about administrative costs. So just sort of as a clarification for you, if in your work program budget, you declared administrative expenses, then these are the percentages that you can declare. And so when I say administrative expenses, I'm going to mean people that are working outside of the program. If you have a case manager who's working on your program, that's not administrative, that's a program cost. But if you have maybe a grant writer or a grant manager or something like that, who's not specifically working on the project, but is putting together the reporting, well, that's an admin person. And so you want to make sure that you're following your admin percentages. For CDB and HOPWA traditional, you can't use more than 7% of your grant on that. For ESG, you cannot use more than 7.5%. Oh, I forgot to update the CV one. So for CDBG CV, it is 10%, HOPWA CV is 10%, and ESG CV is no more than 10%. So it changes a little bit if you're using the COVID funding. Next page. Like I said before, I'm going to do a random sampling of your files. And when I review the files and complete the report, you will receive a letter that is outlining the results of the monitoring. And I will let you know if I have any findings or any concerns. And then I typically give you about 30 days to respond. And then you begin to, follow up with the information that was missing, and that can go on for a while. But you need to, if you receive a letter that has a concern and a finding, you need to respond to me within 30 days. And I'll remind you of that later on. You don't have to worry about it, but just kind of a heads up, that's how that works. And then we will continue to talk throughout after the monitoring is done to make sure that you've turned in everything you need to turn in. Okay, next slide. So a lot of this is repeat, but for those of you that are new or have not done the pay request overview information, this is really important. And I am probably going to have Elaine go through this. She's a pro at it. So what this basically is time-saving tips to help you get a speedy review and a payment. Go ahead and turn the page, Wes, and then Elaine, you want to pick up?
Okay, thank you. Your pay requests are handled on a monthly basis, as we spoke earlier. We do look for it to be at least 30 days. Sometimes we understand in some supporting documentation, like bank statements, it can pay requests up to 60 days. but we understand that after 60 days, that should be enough time to get your prior request in. So, for an example, for July 2020, we expect your expenses in by August 22nd, no later than September 22nd. And there is a guide to help you with the monthly details to all of this. We will be getting sent out. We have to give a few little tweaks to it for the new things that have taken place here within FY21, but we'll get that updated as soon as possible. And these other slides these are just basically common errors that we see most of the time. And we just kind of narrow them down to the top 5 reasons. You'll either receive an email from your grant coordinator or Andy versus a check. And of course, we want to send the check, not the email. So, starting out with making sure that all of your documentation is included. And we need the invoice, we need receipts, dates, account numbers. These are the type of things that we will reconcile back to your supporting documentation and your proof of payment. So your vendor receipt is going to have your vendor name, your account number, your date of the service or good that you procured. And then your proof of payment will pretty much want to be a council check or a bank statement. Some are EAF payments in your bank statement, but there is going to be a linking invoice date, receipt date, account number, an amount, something is going to tie it all together. So we want to make sure that we receive documentation that does this. And of course, if you send it highlighted, then we get to go through that a lot more quicker because you have either asterisk or highlighted what we need to follow. And if you, as I put, give us the breadcrumbs to follow the trail, we don't have to review everything within the supporting documentation because sometimes when you start digging, as Nancy said earlier, you come up with more questions. So the less questions we have, the quicker your payment goes through. The next thing is signature lines. Can we go back one slide, Wes? I want to talk a little bit about the signature numbers because I know that has been a question on. No, we want to go back to number 5. I know that's been a question for a lot of subrecipients, and Andy might want to jump in on this as well. In the past, the signature lines on either your agency's documentation or the Louisville Metro government documentation, we couldn't have a blank. COVID, however, has changed up some of the way we are acquiring signatures now. Of course, there's DocuSign that's the most popular right now. But we also understand that every agency can't have DocuSign or can't procure it. So with that being said, Andy, would you like to step in and discuss what we are looking into as far as our signatures go, with our timesheets and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, so the timing on this is great because Wes just yesterday got an answer from HUD about electronic signatures on timesheets. So it has been very liberal in its interpretation of what can be signed electronically. And as you guys know from the invoices that you submit for quite a while, the invoice itself, when you submit, will, if it's sent electronically, would just have the, the CEO or the CFO's name just typed on it because it's, being sent electronically. And so the question Wes asked is on timesheets, can you just have like a typed name on the timesheet if the timesheet was emailed by the employee to show that as like an electronic signature? Do you need to use something fancy like WebEx? And HUD never answers with just a straight answer of yes. I think that's against their rules. But they, what they gave us was a link to another document that was very aggressive in wanting to implement, the easiest forms of electronic signature possible. So, we're interpreting that, according to the intent of the document, that however you want to get things signed electronically will probably be okay. It doesn't have to be an expensive system to sign. If you've got something that, the employee just name in a document on the signature line, then we'll take it. If there's a signature line, it can't just be blank. You've got to have something on the signature line. It could, even if it's just as an explanation, employee no longer, employee has been terminated, or if it's, supervisor contacted employee by phone, is what's written on this, on the signature line, then that'll be okay. But you can't just have a blank signature line. There's got to be something there, whether it is a typed name in the acting as an electronic signature, or whether it is a note to explain that, why the employee couldn't sign in person. Any of those will be accepted, but the signature line cannot be blank because the federal government hates blank signature lines. Thank you.
So, any other questions about the signatures?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Go ahead, Jane.
Thank you. So if we have an employee who, for example, is on ESG and in the month of November has no hours towards ESG, is any signature required, or can I just state on the PAR no ESG hours?
Okay, my question is, if this employee has not obtained any hours to the award, why would you be submitting something for it? I guess it's, if you're not looking for reimbursement of any of his time for this particular award, then you shouldn't need to submit anything requesting that.
Oh, well, that answers my question then.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, then we'll move on. As I was saying, of course, earlier, as far as highlighting or asterisk or circle your information, your supporting documents, where we can easily reconcile them all together, it saves a lot of time on our. Okay, Wes, we can go to the fourth one now. Thank you. And of course, as Nancy has already said, please refer back to your CFRs for what is eligible and what is ineligible and what is allowable, because we do strictly follow our CFRs. Next slide, please. Okay, the next thing we see is what we'll call excessive documentation. Although on your side, it looks like, well, this might be better information, or this supporting document might be better information. And then when you can't decide which is better, you send it out. We're not upset about that. I believe too much is better than not enough. But at the same time, we want to ensure that we don't have over the top too much. So if you can keep your request, your goods or service requests down to just the actual invoice for the service or good or receipt, and then just the proof of payment for that service or good that you've already expended those funds so we can reimburse it, that's great. If you feel that certain documentation is not going to tell the full story, then feel free to include whatever documentation you think will be needed to tell that full story to get that reimbursement. Okay, next one, please, Liz. And again, this follows back with the excessive, or the worst part, in my opinion, is not enough, the incomplete. We want to make sure an invoice has proof of payment, council check, bank statement, EAF and bank statement. And you also want to make sure that your bank statement and your proof of payment has an invoice to go with it. I've seen proof of payments, and I don't know what the invoice is that's being paid, or vice versa. And of course, when it comes to your PNR, which is your personnel activity reports, and the fringe benefits, yes, you need to see which fringe benefit you are requesting reimbursement for. It can be health insurance, it can be short-term, long-term disability, it can be life insurance, it can be pension. I mean, there's a list of fringe benefits. But we do need the supporting documentation showing the employee that is receiving that benefit, and the payment details for the reimbursement. And then the next common thing is we need the submissions. No, go back, Wes, I'm still on that one. Thank you. We need each submission to be able to stand alone. In other words, if you're sending pay requests 6, 7, and 8, then that might get reviewed by 3 totally different people. So if a bank statement that is going to be needed with 6, 7, and 8 is only with 6, then the person who's reviewing 7 doesn't have all of the documentation needed. They're going to be reaching out because they're not going to know to go back to the person who reviewed 6. So, with that being said, if each submission can stand alone with the supporting documentation it's going to need on its own, that is a big plus, and that saves a lot of time we would be reaching out, requesting that documentation. Okay, now I'm ready for this. Thank you. And then, of course, number 1 is just basically simple oversights. I know once you have looked at a document 4 or 5 different times, it is hard to catch something new. Been there, done that. totally understand. But before you put those supporting docs in the mail, it's always good just to go through it and make sure that your invoices, your proof of payments are lining up. Your personnel activity reports, the detail page, and the payroll information, everything is all lining up. You also want to check back and make sure that your supporting documentation and your pay log workbooks are reconciling, because I mean, transposing numbers happens more often than you think. Even with me, it does. So I always want to double check my math and make sure that the deciding a number is in all the right places. And then, of course, we talked about the signatures. And last but not least, unclear documentation. We got to make sure the documentation is legible, it's readable, and of course, the icing on the cake would be that it's highlighted, asterisk, or circled, so we can find it immediately. But we definitely need it to be clear, legible, and readable. Otherwise, we're not sure what we're reimbursing. And those are the top things that can hold up a payment going through. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question. I have a statement. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. When I was helping Elaine earlier in the year, I'm gonna highlight what she just said about highlights. So you want to think of this as what is the quickest way for my contract coordinator to find exactly what they need without looking at a bunch of stuff I don't want them to spend time on or whatever. And so really and truly, not kidding, if you just take a simple highlighter and take the dollar amount, for example, that's on the check stub and match it to, or in the pay date on the check stub and match it to the payroll journal and then match that to the bank statement with the same color highlighter, you're basically telling our eyes where to go. And so if you think of it that way, like you're sort of the tour guide through your folders and you don't want us to get caught up on all the other pages. You want us to follow that line right on through. So anything you can do that does that. We've had people come in and we've had people put Post-it notes on them and change the colors and highlights, anything like that at all. Be as creative as you want. As long as it directs our eyes, it's amazing how much quicker it goes. So amazing. It's so fast. And I think for our new contract coordinators, that will be the same for them as well, because they're still trying to figure out exact columns to look at and things like that. And if you're directing their eye, then you're helping them out. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, that's very important. Thank you.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
You know, it's super redundant, but it's so important. I'm just going to pile onto this as well. That if you can just imagine getting an invoice to review, and there's it includes a receipt from Office Depot for $50.12, and then you've got the agency's bank statement for the entire month, and it's like 40 pages long, and you're trying to go through all 40 pages trying to find an Office Depot receipt to verify that it was paid. How much difference it makes if there's an asterisk next to it, or even better, if you only include that one page from the bank statement that has it and it's got an asterisk, and leave out all the pages that don't have anything to do with any of the expenses that you're claiming. It makes it so much easier to review. So please, if you've got expenses from throughout the month that you're claiming, then you may need to include the entire bank statement. But any unnecessary pages that are left out, and by all means highlighting the expenses that we've got to reconcile, it just saves a ton of time. So look at it from the perspective of the person that has to match up everything in the invoice you've submitted, and it'll help you a lot. Thanks.
Yep, that's awesome. Any other questions on the turning into pay reimbursements? Do most of you feel like you've got that? I know last year there was a learning curve, but I notice now that it's kind of even and all out. So that's great. It's exciting. Any other questions on that? Okay.
Nancy, can I just tail in on what you just said? I want to be able to tell the subrecipients, you guys have been through a lot, and not just last year. The last couple of years has been such a huge learning curve for everybody. And I just want to commend you all the way you stepped up, you took all of it in, you've worked it all through, and we are coming to our happy medium of everything coming to filtration. So thank you guys. I really appreciate how you guys have really helped out. Thanks a lot.
Yep, that's awesome. Okay, before we go into questions, I'm going to ask a couple things. Denise Thomas, if you are on, stick a note in the chat box to let me know which agency you are with, or just speak up and let me know.
Hi, this is Denise Thomas. I'm with Family Scholar House.
Family Scholar House. Awesome. I was trying to remember and I just could not remember. So thank you. Okay, and then before we jump into questions, I want some feedback on something. So this is the year, of course, of COVID and DocuSign. And so I want you all to either speak up or drop me a note in the chat box. How do you feel about the DocuSign? Did you like it? Did you feel like it was easy? Was it helpful? Did you not like it? Jump in here and give me some feedback on that. Good. Greer likes it a lot. Dorothy likes it. Good. She felt like it was easy. Good. Christine, awesome. Anybody have challenges with it? Ashley likes it. Hey, Ashley, how are you? I can see you in here. Good, awesome. Okay, if you have issues with it, let us know. But I think once we sort of figured it out, it went really well. And so you'll probably see us using that more, especially now that we're still in sort of this COVID thing where a lot of us are here on different days and a lot of you are working home on different days, or a lot of times we're quarantined. So you have not seen the last of DocuSign. There'll be a lot of it this year. But good. Tony says, please keep it up. So that's great. And if you do run into issues or you happen to notice that there's something that's not quite real smooth, let us know and we'll try to.
I'm sorry, full size platinum bed. Wait, platform.
Say it again. Did someone say?
Looks like, oh, okay. They muted their mic.
Oh, okay. Must have been somebody talking. Very well. Okay, so what questions can we answer about any of this? Again, this is sort of both orientation and reporting meetings. So go ahead and start asking some questions while we're on here and let's see what we can take care of for you. For real? No questions? Are you kidding me?
I can't believe this either. Is everybody trained this good? No.
It's probably raining outside. Lisa says, can we send out the slides? I'm okay with it unless they tell us not to. I think it's fine. Anything else? All right. Well, remember, if you have issues with reporting, I know it's due today and on the next day, just speak out, reach out to your contract coordinator and we will get it resolved for you. And most of all, I of course have so many questions. Oh, sorry, that was private. No problem. We'll take care of all your questions. Don't worry about it. Just give us a call. And the most important thing out of all of this, of course, is that we would not be able to do what we do for the homeless community and those at risk of being homeless if it was not for you. And so we are very appreciative of all your work. And I mean that. I'm not just, I'm serious, that it makes all the difference. So Mary Frances, are you still on? Do you want to add anything? She may not be on. That's okay. Very well. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Reach out if you need us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I think it's just us now. I'm going to go ahead and hit the unrecord button, and then you all can sort of talk about what went well, what needs to change. Let me hit the unrecord just in case.